You're listening to Following On with me, Neil Manthorp, along with former England fast bowler Steve Harmison for the usual mix of news, opinion and occasional whimsy. As you'll know by now, Australia have announced their squad for the first Ashes test in less than 2 weeks' time, with Sam Konstas dropped in favour of Jake Weatherald, the main news. We'll hear from National Selector George Bailey and get the thoughts of talkSPORT's chief cricket writer Daniel Cherny, with just one player in the 15-man squad under 30. England's lead fast bowling coach Neil Killeen will look ahead to a busy winter for the Lions and discuss the fast bowlers' chances of making history in Australia this winter. And we'll discuss England's preparation for the Ashes and ask if just one warm-up game against the Lions is enough preparation. As well as that, we'll discuss the latest changes to the 100, preview South Africa's Test tour of India, and as always, bring you the final word. So plenty to come over the next hour. This is Following On. I'm delighted to say we're joined live from Australia by Daniel Cherny, chief cricket writer at talkSPORT, to talk about the Australian squad. Dan, thanks so much for your time. I suppose the composition of the final 11 was dependent on whether Cameron Green was fit enough to bowl. I see that he has been bowling, or is bowling, for Western Australia against Queensland. So does that mean he'll bat 6 and Marnus will bat at 3? Thanks for your time, by the way. Good to see you.
No, likewise, Manners and Harvey. It's great to be with you. Look, I think you're probably right. It did hinge. It appeared to hinge on whether Cameron Green was going to bowl. He had only bowled 4 overs in competitive cricket in more than 12 months on the back of that back surgery that he had last year, which kept him out of the entire home summer, the Test series against India and Sri Lanka, the IPL as well. And then he was back as a specialist batter in the World Test Championship final, and then against the West Indies. And then he had a little side niggle, so he missed he only bowled in that first Shield game, then didn't play the second, didn't bowl in the third. So it was pretty important that he was going to bowl in this fourth. He has been bowling a lot in the nets, but I suppose there's nothing quite like that match play. But good signs today. He was back bowling, took an early wicket, and it does appear like he will be able to play. Yes, he needs to get through, and this could change. It's only day one of that match. It actually started one day later than the rest of the Shield round, just to give players an extra bit of time to get back from the East Coast if they were playing in the T20 series against India. And also because the first test is in Perth, it didn't need you could have an extra tighter turnaround before the Aussie squad converged. So looking pretty good, which I suppose would be bad news for Bo Webster enthusiasts, given that he'd obviously held down that spot and done a pretty good job, and took a 5 for himself playing for Tassie against South Australia at Bellerive Oval in this Shield round, but has missed out a couple of times with the bat. I think ultimately it wasn't really going to matter. I think they like the idea of a specialist opener in Jake Weatherald, who, as you touched on, has replaced Sam Konstas, and Marnus Labuschagne at 3. And they sense, the selectors, that having, and a lot of the senior players as well, I think it's worth noting, prefer the balance of having Labuschagne at 3, and then you have Green at 6 and a specialist opener, which in this case is Jake Weatherald.
Yeah, Osman Khawaja. There's been a lot of talk from, a lot of players have been out and about doing the media rounds. Khawaja mentioned about Labuschagne batting 3, but Dan, no question, Lyon's going to play. I mean, Cameron Green not bowling a huge amount. No Pat Cummins. Are they worried about being short on sort of seamer overs, with it being an Optus and the ball flying through? Are they going to play an all-seam attack, or is Lyon definitely going to play?
Look, I'd be very surprised if Lyon didn't play, Harmy. I know, look, it's only Australia's most recent test that he didn't play, so it's not beyond the realms of possibility. And, they've shown now that they are willing to do it. And I suppose, to a degree, Nathan Lyon, for the rest of his Test career, will probably be looking a little bit over his shoulder, certainly in any seam-friendly conditions, because, as I said, they have been willing to do it. I think it would have been a different conversation, perhaps, if Pat Cummins was fit, whether they potentially have gone in with the 4 frontline seamers. But I just get the sense that 3 frontline seamers plus 2 all-rounders does not necessarily equal 4 frontline quicks. I think, that would be a bit of a bits and pieces attack, potentially leaves you vulnerable. Look, there's risk either way to a degree. Nathan Lyon had not had an outstanding start to the Shield season. Did take 4 wickets, though, in the first innings for New South Wales against Victoria on day 1 of that match. New South Wales actually fell on the heap today with the bat. Only Steve Smith really made runs for them, as Victoria continuing their very good start to the season. But no, look, I'd be surprised. The only time Australia's played that sort of composition was actually at the Manchester Test in 2023. Of course, Lyon was injured by that point of the Ashes, and Todd Murphy had played the third Test, then got dropped. They played Green and Mitch Marsh together as sort of a combined fourth bowler, and it didn't really work. So I'd be very surprised if they went that way. I think they're going to back the frontline quicks to get the job done. And Nathan Lyon, despite maybe it not appearing like that would be the case at face value, does have a very good record in Perth where his he can extract a fair bit from the bounce. So I think he will play, yes.
Dan, Steve Waugh doesn't say much these days, but when he does talk, it's usually it usually makes an impact. He said that there were some tough decisions to make selection-wise, and he didn't think that George Bailey had shown much appetite to make tough decisions. Let's just hear Bailey's response to that.
We're aware of the age profile of the team. I'm interested when people sort of have that view as to who would they like us to leave Nathan Lyon and Mitch Starc out. Is just because of their age, or is that? But I think there's other ways of attacking that. Again, we're investing heavily into Australia A cricket. We're rolling some young guys through. There's been debuts. There's been people on tours. That will happen, but I think you have to have respect for the fact that these guys work incredibly hard to play Test cricket. We see it as still the sort of pinnacle format, and so I think you've got to give due respect that the guys are performing very well, and they earn the right to be selected. But no, I'm not sure the players pick it. I'm sure there'd be more names on that list if the players were able to pick it.
That's Australia's Chief Selector George Bailey responding with some degree of, I think, whimsy to Steve Waugh's comments. Dan, I mean, just on a wider picture, I'm interested in your take on the age thing as well. And, Bailey makes a very good point. What does he want me to do? Drop Mitchell Starc and Nathan Lyon because they're 35 or 38? But it ties into a real eyebrow-raising piece that you wrote a couple of days ago, in which you said that as many as half of the nationally contracted players would be prepared not to be contracted to Cricket Australia, in order to have freedom and play franchise cricket. Now, did you put a bit of topspin on that? Or, I mean, because otherwise it doesn't look good for Australian cricket.
I'm not sure who's put the topspin there. Look, the story came from the ACA, Australian Cricketers Association's annual report, in which they outlined some highlights from a players' survey which they'd done across certainly across selection. I imagine all would have been asked of contracted players. That's nationally, state, and either BBL or WBL. So this is across men and women, nationally and state contracted players, and BBL contracted players. And the stat was 34% of players would consider going, turning down, foregoing a state or franchise or BBL or national contract to go on, I suppose, the franchise circuit, the global circuit. Now, that's actually, in some respects, and obviously, Manners, you know this all too well from what South Africa's been through. We know New Zealand and the West Indies has been very well documented over the years. It's actually lower than the global, the World Cricket Association did a poll last year. I think the number was 60%, or asked a similar question. But that's one thing for globally when you're looking at players from all manner of nations, some not even necessarily Test nations, that whether they would do it. I mean, I understand if someone from Scotland or Afghanistan is weighing that up, but when it's Australia, where it's got obviously a historically very robust state and big bash contract system, and this is at a time when there's a big discussion about the privatisation of the Big Bash League going on. It is a concern. I think it has to be a concern. The current pay deal memorandum of understanding between CA and the ACA still has a couple of years to run, doesn't expire till 2028. But it's a rapidly changing time in cricket. There's so many moving parts. And I mean, we're already seeing it to a degree, because you look at Australia's men's T20 11, and two of the best, two of the linchpins of that team at the moment are Tim David and Marcus Stoinis, neither of whom certainly didn't accept central contracts to start with, or weren't necessarily even offered central contracts to start with. They're both going to get upgrades with the system here if you play a certain amount of games you trigger a full contract, which they have both now done. But it's certainly obviously this is a big talking point and a big watch this space across international cricket, and the fact that it is now, this phenomenon is reaching Australian shores is one that is a concern for the Australian game.
Yeah, I agree, and I think I've said this on this show, Dan, many times, that I think this Ashes could be a turning point for England to be like that. If Australia win, McCullum and Stokes end up either losing their jobs, or if it goes sort of badly for England, then all of a sudden, where's the pull for the England team to sort of turn down franchise gigs if they're going to, these Indian franchise owners go and get teams from all over the world in the competitions and start contracting individual players. And I think that might happen as early as once this Ashes series is finished. So I think we are at a tipping point in, especially the Test match game, to where the Test match future holds. I think the shortest format game, I think England, Australia, and their players will still hopefully be available for world tournaments. But I think going back to this Ashes, Pat Cummins, is he on track for that second Test match? Because there's a lot of talk of him being on that. Because I think certainly my opinion is, whoever gets off to a good start in Perth, all of a sudden Brisbane could be toss of a coin. You get the luck your way, you could be 2-0 up in 2 Test matches, and that pretty much is the Ashes over for whoever's 2-0 down.
Yeah, obviously historically a very long way back from 2-0. I mean, it's been doing some pre-series previews and various pieces, and that famous stat about only one Test series in history as the team come back from 2-0 down to win back in the 36-37 Ashes, and they did have the advantage of a guy named Don Bradman. It's and Cummins, as good as he is not Bradman, but look, whether he plays in the second Test, I think the jury's still out. They're certainly leaving the door ajar there. And he has been back bowling in Sydney, which is clearly very promising for the Australian team. I don't know. It's a bit of a, it's the rumour mill and the whispers at the moment that are doing the rounds. The sense tends to be that the third and fifth might be more likely. I mean, he himself has now cast doubt as to whether he could play back-to-back Tests in this series. Now, there are relatively sizable gaps between each of the first 4 Tests, 1 to 2, 2 to 3, and 3 to 4. 4 to 5, Melbourne, Sydney is the tightest backup, and you'd imagine it'll be a struggle there. And that may well be a situation where, say, you try to get Scott Boland up for Melbourne. Obviously, I mean, he's got a very good record everywhere in Australia, really, but he on his home deck at the MCG, and then maybe Cummins plays in Adelaide and then in Sydney. So I think there has to be some doubts. I did an interview with Peter Siddle a week or 2 back, and he certainly said, look, he urged Cummins to be really cautious there. He remembers going in now. Peter Siddle, great bowler himself, not quite to Pat Cummins' level, but more than 200 Test wickets for Australia shouldn't be sneezed at either. And he was talking about going into, I think it was the 2016-17 season when South Africa were out here and won that series manners, and he had had a back issue which had ruled him out of the back end of the previous season. He tried to get himself up, played the first Test, and then didn't play another Test for 2 years, almost 2 years. So as good as Pat Cummins is, and as big as the Ashes is, and it is the biggest series on the calendar, a home Ashes series, I think it's hard to disagree with that. You still got to play the long game, because Pat Cummins is 32, and I mean, who knows what the future of international cricket is. And maybe we're talking about IPL campaigns going down the track, but it's ultimately you've got to make sure that Pat Cummins is taken care of in the long run, because it's just not worth it.
Dan, just very quickly, I've got to ask you about Jake Weatherald and the overall perspective of Australian batting. Now, he's got a first-class average of 37, and when Harmy was playing, that wouldn't have been good enough to keep you in the state team, never mind national selection. There is I'll also never forget the intimidation factor that South African and English teams felt coming up against an Australian top 6, all of whom averaged over 50 in Test cricket at one point. I'll never forget, South Africa didn't have a single player averaging over 40, and averages are one way to measure, but I mean that South African team were half beaten before they walked onto the field. But there is a perception that Australian cricket, batting in particular, isn't quite what it used to be. There's been a sort of a decline. Is that a simplistic view?
Not necessarily. I mean, I think certainly the numbers are down. Now, the question is, what is the reason for that? And I think there are multiple reasons. I think it's hard to argue that the pitches in Sheffield Shield cricket and in the Test cricket in Australia in the last few years have been harder to play on. The changes to the Kookaburra ball with the reinforced seam and the lacquer changes, without getting overly technical, I believe have made the game tough harder, particularly against the new ball. I give the example of someone like a Fergus O'Neill you look at it from a bowling perspective. Now, Fergus O'Neill, who bowls in the probably low 120 kilometres an hour, has an exceptional record in first class cricket, both for Australia, for Nottinghamshire, and for Australia A. I think he averages this is a 21 or so. Now, is he in the same calibre of bowler as, say, someone who was towards the top of the Sheffield Shield bowling charts 20 years ago, when teams were routinely piling on 300, 400 consistently, someone like an Ashley Noffke as an example? Possibly not. I don't think he's that much better than someone like that per se. So I think you have to take it with a bit of a grain of salt, the numbers. I think it's a tougher batting era. So you look at someone like a Jake Weatherald. I mean, actually, Marcus Harris is a really interesting example. Now, he's probably played his last Test for Australia. He didn't do very well in Test cricket overall. Had a few handy knocks without ever quite bedding down his spot. I had a look at the stat recently. I think he was averaging 37 or 38 across his first-class career when opening, and he's had a handful of innings now across both county cricket and for Victoria, batting between 4 and 6, and he's averaging 64 in the middle order. And I think it just shows that it is being a new ball batsman in Australia in first-class cricket is tough work. Jake Weatherald's had a very interesting career. Has had some real ups and downs, peaks and troughs, moved states. Has been very open about his mental health struggles, and very bravely spoken about that. I mean, you talk about not getting a game for your state. It wasn't very long ago he wasn't getting a game for his state. We're talking 18 months ago, he couldn't get a game for Tasmania. Wanted to try to move to Victoria after just 1 year in Tasmania. They wouldn't let him go because he was contracted. So I think it's an interesting talking point. I think what you'd say is globally, that these guys are still, broadly speaking, making runs when they go overseas. Not necessarily en masse, but it's not. They went to Sri Lanka and they piled on runs. So I think it's probably more to do with Australian conditions than a massive batting malaise. But the proof will be in the pudding with the next generation. I mean, it's one thing for Steve Smith to go to Sri Lanka and make runs, or Usman Khawaja, but if the next generation, if someone like an Ollie Peake who's coming through at 19, or a Sam Konstas, or even Cameron Green, who's now been in the Test side for 5-6 years, in his mid-20s, unless he can consistently do it overseas, then I think at that point you'll be able to say, no, there is actually a deeper issue, and one which Australian cricket needs to confront.
Finally, Dan, in 10 seconds, you'd be silly enough to give us a prediction.
I would be silly enough. 4-1 Australia. I think England will win one, but I do think that Australia's fast bowling, even without Cummins, will just be too much for England, just with the ball moving around.
Brenda McCullum, Harmy, has always said, judge us afterwards, judge us on the results. But England's low-key build-up is really, really becoming, a strong talking point. Lord Botham was the latest to criticise it, saying that, how can you possibly not play a game? They're going to have one game, and it's not really going to be a game, is it? I mean, it's scheduled for 4 days. It's against the England Lions. It's certainly not going to be 11 aside. There's 18 in the Lions squad and 16 in the Ashes squad, and I'm trying hard not to be judgmental. Let's hear what your and my great friend Darren Gough had to say about England playing just one warm-up game.
When you net or you ball through to the keeper, it's not the same. It's not the same as playing in a game. It's like when you say, yeah, look, we're going to go out there, practice 100%. It's not, because you're bowling at someone who you've been with all the time. If I had suddenly put Justin Langer in front of me and I'm bowling like 5 miles an hour quicker because I want to absolutely knock his head off and I want to get a Test wicket, I'm bowling at Dear Alf at the other end in a practice match. It's nothing on it. My body's going through the motions. Yes, I'm bowling, but I'm going through the motions. I haven't got that competitive edge playing against Australia with 50,000 people in the game. Another thing that annoys me about the practice games they have against each other is, but they'll have, oh no, can we play 12 or play 13? And then they'll go in and they just smack it all over and walk off after they get 50, and that's enough. I mean, there's no pressure. It's nothing like playing a test match. Going to Australia is one of the hardest places to go as a cricketer. You want to test yourself against the real elite.
That's Darren Gough. And he, I think, is in the majority, Harmy, of those who are asked about England's preparation. You know, as Brendan McCullum says, he's in the horse racing business, and you don't want your best horses running round the track endlessly when you've got a big race coming up. So we understand his methodology, but an awful lot of people don't.
Yeah, I mean, obviously we're in the majority because I'd like them to play a little bit more. It's not play more cricket. It's just get miles in meaningful miles in the legs. And I understand what Brendan's saying, and yeah, he's right. You don't want them going round the track. You don't want them bowling endless overs that they don't need to bowl. You don't want them fielding for more overs than they need to field. But I still think, especially when it comes to Ashes series, 5 test matches, him and Ben might be of the opinion you don't want to sort of blow everybody out and make sure that you've got enough in the tank for all 5 test matches. But if you've not got enough in preparation ready for the first one, you could be beating the first one, beating the second one, and all of a sudden, by the time you get to sort of race and pace or fight and weight or where you need to be, especially the way this series is set up, Perth being a different type of wicket from the rest of the other 4, which is going to bounce a little bit more. And then a day-night test match where you could get on the wrong side of a toss or you could get on the right side of a toss. So, whichever way and sometimes that toss in Brisbane, the day-night one, that you have to work very, very hard at the start of the game to get in control of the game to then be, the right side of that, of the light situation. So when I look at, and I'm finding it hard to go 2 feet into, criticizing Ben and Brendan because I've done it before, and not that I had a comeback off it, but I get what they're trying to do. I get and understand that they don't want to be possibly tired. They've got a lot of bowlers with injury track records. They don't want to be in a position where they're sending people home before the series starts. But I think there's a happy balance, and I don't think they've got it right. I really don't. And just 2 innings is in a match situation. At Lilac Hill as well. I mean, Lilac Hill doesn't bounce. It's a slower surface compared to what the Optus Stadium's going to be. So 4 innings in the middle. Archer's just had 20 odd overs, probably in a match situation in New Zealand. Their batters have just batted in New Zealand, which bounce wise will be something similar to what Lilac Hill is. Not as much lavish movement, but bounce to the ball, steeper bounce, similar to what Lilac Hill is going to be. Optus is going to be completely different. It's going to be 2, possibly 3 inches higher when a ball passes the bat. So all these things are going to come into the difference between playing in another country and playing in Australia, especially playing in the Optus on the first day. And Brisbane might bounce as well. So Goffy's right. He always is. I think Surrean Botham is not quite right, but closer to where the England cricket team is. Beefy wants to play 4 matches. You got to play 4 matches. Sir Andrew Strauss' team played 3 matches. That's probably, I think 3's getting to too much. 4's definitely too much. But I think, as batters, your top 6, top 7 batters concerned, I'd like them to have 4 meaningful innings in the middle before that first test, for the simple fact is they might get nicked off or they're going to walk straight back in again. Net situation is completely different to a match situation. It's like going to the driving range. Especially, there's a lot of golf and terminology with this lot. So it's like going to the driving range and you hook one left. You know, the way the driving ranges are now, and one of them electric pop-up tees come, and then 20 seconds later, you belt one down the middle. Oh, I feel great now. Well, if you nick one, you ain't getting the feeling great bit because you're already gone. And that puts pressure on you. And the pressure is already ramped up. We've seen what's happened with Ben, and we've seen what's happened with Joe Root on the newspaper, on the front of the newspaper. I actually think the Australians have done that wrong. I really do. New Zealand-born Ben Stokes, like he's heard that one before. I mean, going at Ben Stokes at the start of an Ashes tour. I mean, I think Ben Stokes will be over the moon with that. I think the England cricket team will be over the moon with that. The Western Australian's going to throw some stuff at Ben Stokes that he's had before. I mean, what he's had throughout his career, Ben will be like, just bring it on. I'll deflect it off the team. Polly, if you want to have a go at me, I've been had a go at for many, many years by all walks of newspapers everywhere around the world. If you want to have a go at me in my cricket team and it's me that you're having a go at, happy days. I think Ben will be over the moon with that because it's not one of the others. Yeah, because it's a toxic environment when you go into Australia. Just think that the happy balance would have been possibly a game against an Australian team, and then you play the Lions, and then you go against Australia. I think having just 2 innings, and if you don't get any runs, it makes a mockery if you start coming back in again. Zach Crawley, Ben Duckett, nick off for Jofra Archer or whoever's going to bowl, whether they split the teams up or not. And then they have to come back in again. If they bat 3 times, if they bat 4 times in this game, that for me makes a more negative headlines than only playing just the one first-class match. If it's played under first-class rules, because I don't think it will be. I think you'd be right. I think there'll be 14 aside. And will we see the scorecards from it? Will we get any footage from it? England might just close doors and say, right, we're going to play this game behind closed doors. Again, that brings another negative headline that England don't need.
Yeah, you refer to the West Australian. For those who haven't seen it, there was a back page story in which, there's the Australian media can be very funny and they can be very sharp, and they can be very witty, and they come up with
they're clowns.
some
They're clowns.
But Harmy, that was pathetic.
It was.
That lacked humor. It lacked wit. It was so sad to see the West Australians stoop to that.
They're 50-odd heroes, man. They are. I mean, they are. I mean, that journalist there, if he walked past Ben Stokes in the street, he would not say a thing to him. He wouldn't.
Yeah.
He wouldn't say a thing to him. He wouldn't go up and say, "Oh, Ben, did you like my thing? Oh, I did this and this and this." He would not say a thing. He'd get smaller, and go on the other side of the road. That's what I mean by a 50-yard hero.
I wouldn't call him a journalist either. Now, listen, I really want you to take us as much as you can. I don't even know whether you would have experienced playing a match of this stature or lack of stature. I mean, but there are too many people like me who've never been in the environment who are quick to judge. So to me, it seems that if you're playing in any match that doesn't have first class status, it doesn't count towards your record. Therefore, it doesn't mean as much. Plus, you're playing against your fellow countrymen. I mean, again, take us. Imagine that you're in that environment. So for me, you can't get more low key. You can't get. I mean, they're prioritizing grooving for the bowlers, I suppose, over grunt reality. And I mean, and that's, I'm not alone in that impression. Or am I being unkind? Am I misjudging? These are professional sportsmen. Of course, they will run in as if it mattered.
I think the Lions will. I think that's the thing that you hope that it's not the actual game itself, man. If it's played under first class rules,
it's not going to be.
As in, well, you're gonna.
Oh, seriously.
I would like to think there'll be two professional umpires. I'd like to think there'll be a structure of, 6 ball overs and 90 overs in a day. 3 2-hour sessions. On that front, I think it will be fine if it's played like that. And I also think that I have got no problem with the England playing England Lions. I think it's a good idea. I really do. Because, however many Lions boys play, whether it's 11 or 15, every single one of them will be going, from Andrew Flintoff's point of view, will be going, right, if one of these gets injured, this is your chance to play in the Ashes. This is what Andrew Flint, it's an easy team talk, if you want, for a better word, There's no, Churchillian speech that Andrew Flintoff has to make to the Lions team. This is 7 weeks in Australia. One of these boys gets injured, you have got a great chance of not only making your debut in an Ashes series. So from the Lions' point of view, these are our next best. So I reckon we've got, from that point of view, I think the actual contest between the Lions bowlers and England's batters will be very, very good. Now, where is it when it comes to England's bowlers going against the Lions batters? That's where probably the concern is, the worrying concern is. I think the juice is flowing. If England's bowlers then knock them over, where do they get their long day in the field? Because you need a long day in the field to get up to speed for that first Test match. You can't. It's not. I've got no problem that Jofra and Mark Wood, Bryden Carson, Gus Atkinson, if they're the four-man attack for the first Test, I've got no problem. They'll bowl 15 overs. Can they bowl 4 at the end of the day between 80 and 90 overs? Potentially taking that second new ball when the sun's going down, and having 80 overs in their legs, and making it meaningful and effective, and bowling 90 mile an hour to knock 2 wickets over at the end of the day. I think that's what a lot of people are worried about from a preparation point of view. So the England Lions against England, if it's played properly, I think it's a good idea. I just wish England had played possibly an Australian 11 either before or after going into that first Test. And for me, that would be the perfect preparation. The England Lions boys will be ready to show the selectors that they are the next cab off the rank. So because of that, I think it's more of a difficult test for the England top order facing that than facing possibly a Western Australian second 11 or a Farmer's 11 or a Prime Minister's 11, because what you're going to have, you look at the England Lions bowlers, the likes of Josh Hull, Eddie Jack, Sonny Baker, Gilchrist, Laws, who's just getting a development contract. These are good bowlers. Matt Fisher, who I think Matt Fisher might be the one that plays a Test match in Australia. They're going to be ready for England's top order. And I think it's the worrying bit for the other way around is if England bowl the Lions out for, say, 120 twice and field for 40 overs, 45 overs twice, is that enough to get ready for that first Test match? I don't think so. So I think that's what worries a lot of former England players who have been on Ashes tours, because, like I said before, the big thing for me, another big factor for me will be all the eyes of Australia will be on that game. And if it is for 1 second played like a dog and duck 11, we will see it. We will hear about it because Australian media will show us. So if Jofra Archer's, running around with his, with no whites on or with his jumper around his waist, and if all of a sudden, England start using 15 fielders, all these little things that there can be negativity towards this game, the Australian media will pick it up. So my advice to the management of England would be, if this is your only game, play it properly and play it well, and make sure you have no comebacks going into that first Test, because that for me was where the negativity will be.
Okay, you made that clear. Thanks for that. You missed a name though when you were listing those bowlers. England might have 34 players in Australia, but Ollie Robinson's come up with a cunning scheme to jump the queue. He's playing club cricket in Sydney. He's been bowling to Steve Smith and Sam Konstas in the New South Wales Nets, and he's quite open about it. He says if there's an outside chance, if there is a rash of injuries, and I'm there and I'm bowling well and taking wickets in grade cricket, then it wasn't so long ago, Harmy, when you came off your own long run and said that you didn't think Ollie Robinson would ever play for England again.
I don't think he will. I don't think he will. Yeah, he could be on the moon and bowling well, but I don't think he's going to get a game for England. He's let Stokes down. For me, that's it. You know, as much as everything he's saying, and unfortunately we've heard a lot of these words out of young Oliver's mouth, and I've got no question that he is a fantastic bowler and a one that should have played a lot more for England. And his qualities are to be really, really high quality seam bowler. But he broke the trust of the captain, I think. I don't know this for a fact. I've not spoken to Ben about it. But from the outside, it looked as though he broke the trust of the captain and the coach by not being fit enough, not wanting to be the professional he should have been from an international cricketer's point of view. And I think once you break Ben Stokes' trust, I think you're done. And unfortunately for Ollie, you might get 5 for every single week in grade cricket. I don't think you are anywhere near getting picked for England, even if you go and get, like you said, 70 wickets for Sussex next season. Unfortunately, I think while McCullum and Stokes is there, as much as Ben was really close to Ollie Robinson, if there's a trust being broken, I don't think you get in. So, good to see him back playing. Good to hear them words. Some will say you've heard it all before. But I think what them words are, hopefully, if I was a Sussex fan, music to the Sussex fans' ears. But I think the ship sailed when it comes to the England cricket team.
I think Ollie knows that his behaviour wasn't pristine, doesn't he? He gave an interview to the Daily Telegraph, and
Very
in
good
which
as well.
he sounded quite contrite.
Yeah, I've heard it before. I've said some of them things myself. And I've not been as professional as I should have been. I know what it's like, and you do sometimes see it when you've actually got nowhere to go, and you try and claw your way back. And unfortunately, once you broke the trust of one of your leaders, then it's even further back. And I don't think in the ages that I don't think there's a way back for Ollie Robinson, unfortunately.
Right, it's time, as promised at the top of the show, to talk England Lions with ECB lead fast bowling coach Neil Killeen. Let's talk about this tour, Killer, if we may.
Yeah.
4 matches. The most intriguing is the first one against Ben Stokes' team. I mean, there's a perception, obviously, that your lot are going to be basically a sparring partner and a punch bag. How's the game going to play out? I mean, do you think it'll be intense?
Yeah, I think it will. Yeah, I mean, I think the boys, well, certainly our boys are certainly up for it. I know it looks like the England boys are ready to play this game in a really competitive spirit, which is going to be really exciting. And I mean, I look at it from the Lions' point of view. What an exciting moment for some of these young lads to go and play against the full England side and put yourself in the shop window.
Well, I mean, you're right. You're out there sort of mirroring the England party. So there's going to be a huge amount of pressure and a huge amount of questions asked whenever you're sort of side by side and the media scrutiny that comes with it. I mean, that can only be a good thing for some of these young lads, because you're hoping, and we were just joking aside there before about being a sort of, bowling coach, but you're hoping that some of these bowlers, one, possibly could be ready for this Ashes trip if England have a disaster when it comes to injuries, but 2, more importantly, will be ready for the next Ashes at home and potentially the next Ashes away.
Yeah, look, the role of this Lions group and the work that kind of Ed Barney, Fred and myself are trying to do is to give these lads opportunities to experience things which they're going to have to experience if they step up to that top level. And the more environments, the more people we can put them around, the more experiences, the more surfaces, the more kind of places we can take them to experience what that's like is only going to help them along that journey.
And you've got 3 games. I think it's three games after the England game. So you're touring Australia. You go in Perth, you go in Canberra, you go in Brisbane. What's them games going to look like? Because there's a variant, and there's a 2-day game, a 3-day game, and a 4-day game. You're gonna come up against Australia here in Brisbane. Is your lead up to that game the sort of 2 warm-up games, and that's going to be a first-class match, and we're going to nail playing against Australia here?
Yeah, look, that's certainly what we'll look to do. We were out here last winter and we played some strong games against Australia here. So we got the first one, we go to Canberra, where we play a 2-day, day-night pink ball game, which again, in itself is a huge experience that you just can't replicate anywhere. So they're going to put out, be interested to see who they turn out. I mean, you look at the squad that they've picked this week, there's quite a lot of names that they haven't picked in that squad. So I would imagine we'll get some of them comes up against the Lions, which again is going to be a really exciting moment for some of these lads. But to go day night with a pink ball is another experience which some of these guys haven't had. They won't have played a huge amount of 4-day cricket back in England. Certainly won't have probably played the pink ball games, which were a couple of years ago. So it's a new experience. We then come back the first one's against an Australia 11 here in Perth. So again, that's going to be a strong game at Lilac Hill. And then we go back for the kind of what we would class the first-class test match in Brisbane.
You know, we used to talk about game time and the importance of game time and match overs in legs. Have you found yourself adapting to a new era and a different way of preparation? I mean, there seems to be a feeling, obviously there's many people observing with some concern that Mark Wood hasn't played a game for months. But have you reviewed the way you see conditioning? Do you think players can now, in this day and age, get conditioned to play in a match, in a test series, by putting overs in practice?
Well, I think we have to, just because of the way schedules and things like that operate now. Playing in matches is always going to be really good preparation, but we can only play in matches when kind of time allows and people are ready to play in matches. And I think what we need to do is make sure that we give enough preparation time outside of that and try and replicate as close as we can the amount of time that they spend, 1, bowling, and 2, on their feet, ready for that longer form cricket.
I look at this, the Lions bowling group, a name stands out because he's been pushed a little bit in the 100 and he's made his ODI debut, and that's Sonny Baker. Josh Hull, he's made his test debut. You've got the likes of Eddie Jacks, Matt Fisher's played test match cricket. When you look at the rise of where they've sort of been and come from, how do you manage their development? And is it key that, there's a few of them got like development central contracts, so you then produce their program as opposed to the counties? How important is that?
Well, basically what it does, you look at that group, and especially there's a number of different kind of levels of experience within that group, like you've just alluded to. Some have played a number of first-class games, some haven't played many at all. And I think what those contracts that we put out with that group allow us to do is, one, allow us to work really closely with how they're working in their counties, on what they're working on from a bowling point of view and from a physical point of view, as well as adding to the rest of it in kind of psychological, all of those aspects as well. But it allows us to get them in a really good place, work hand in hand with counties, so as when they then do make that step up, we're in a stronger position for them to be able to succeed when they get to that international level. And again, that all fits into where the Lions program drops in as well, because then we then give them those experiences of experiencing things outside of the country in different environments, different sort of pitches and all of that sort of stuff as well.
I'm not going to ask you, it'd be unfair to ask you, and you wouldn't have the answer for how many test matches Mark Wood or Jeff Archer are going to play. But you've been in charge of the elite program, so you've managed them, getting into this trip. You manage them when they're injured and stuff like that. I've just done a newspaper article for a newspaper in Australia, and like Man has mentioned before, Mark hasn't played since February. I've got no problem with Mark Wood going straight into a test match and playing. He's proven over his career that he can do that. I think his problem is the recovery part to then go again. How happy are you where England's bowlers are at this moment in time? Not just Archer, not just Wood, but where all their bowlers are. But I think the headline acts, and a lot of people's on the names on a lot of people's lips, is Wood and Archer. You know, how happy are you seeing how they've developed over the course of this preparation part of the tour to where they need to be to potentially play in Perth, Brisbane, and potentially Adelaide?
Yeah, I'm very happy. They've come through a period through this last sort of month, and well, longer than the last month, when they've coming back through some work at Loughborough and then out into where they are now in Perth, going into this game against the Lions this week. I'm really happy with where they're operating, and looking forward to seeing what they put out there this week.
What about the pitches in Australia, Killer? I mean, I know England have gone for pace where possible, and it's a quite a collection of fast bowlers. Was there? I mean, I know you didn't select the squad, but do you think that there is perhaps more of a place now for those 80-mile-an-hour bowlers? Batsmen seem to be averaging less, and the scores are not so high in Australia in recent years.
I think when you look at the numbers of what's succeeding and what's working in international and Test cricket, it's those quicker men that are operating at 85 plus, which are producing the smaller numbers. So, I mean, that's why if you look around the teams around world cricket now, they've got a good group of fast bowlers in that group. And alongside that, we've got a group of bowlers there who are very skillful. You look at the likes of Josh Tong, Gus Atkinson, Matthew Potts in that group as well. They're very accurate, very skillful bowlers.
And you know, looking at this Lilac Hill contest, you've played in Perth, you know, as in overseas as in club cricket. Lilac Hill's surface is going to be a lot different to the Optus Stadium. How do you make that transition? And more importantly, you know, from a bowler's point of view, who's possibly struggled, I'm talking about my experiences there. When you're talking about lengths in Australia are so key and so crucial. Do you work in that game at Lilac Hill where the ball's probably not going to bounce as much as it is in the Optus? Or do you look at sort of grooving a length, which potentially might have to be a little bit fuller than what you would normally bowl at it, you know, vice versa for the venue that they're going to be playing at?
Yeah, look, I think you've got to play the surface that you're playing on. That's always the case. You know, I mean, you've been numerous places around the world, and you get in there. The key thing for me is about getting in the battle. And in this game, it's about having that wicket-taking mentality, whether that be against England Lions or whether that be against Australia. For me, it's about wicket-taking mentality and getting into that battle as quick as they can in this game and finding out what your lengths are. I mean, what your lengths are to hit the top of off stump would be different to what my lengths are to hit the top of off stump. And working out how that is for you really quickly is really important.
And this is probably going to be the biggest criticism that this preparation for this tour is going to get. A lot of former players are having a go. I've been guilty of it in the past. I've been a little bit in between this time. But you're talking about getting into the battle. I think the getting into the battle bit will be a lot easier for the Lions bowlers to get into the battle with the England batters. But how do you get the England bowlers to get into the battle with the Lions batters? Because for me, that's why I see this one and only game being a very, very difficult preparation point, because that battle I don't think will be as colossal as what the bowlers from the Lions will show, because they'll be saying, right, I can get an Ashes spot here if anybody gets injured, going against Crawley, Duckett, Pope, whoever, where Archer, Wood, Tong, Atkinson going against what likes of Tom Haines and people like that might not be as severe a battle, and be ready preparation wise for the first time.
Yeah, look, I think these boys are still very hungry to perform, and I think they're very hungry to. Well, seeing them this week, they're really hungry to get going and get sort of into this game. Those players that you're talking about there are still very good players as well. These Lions lads are good players who are challenging for places in that international setup, and I think the teams that'll go into this week will put a really strong competition on out at Lilac Hill, and I'm certainly excited to see how that pans out.
Finally, for me, Kill, how are you enjoying it? Yeah, I mean, I've been one of your best. Me and you have been best mates for 25 years, and I think I've seen Nasser Hussain smile more than what you do, because you're a miserable so and so. But and even there now. But how are you enjoying? I mean, it's an Ashes series. It's going to be so exciting. You're there. You're in the forefront of it. I mean, how are you enjoying it?
Oh, it's absolutely brilliant. I mean, to be out here in and around and alongside the Ashes boys going into a series, it's really, really exciting. And to have a group of bowlers who you've spent the last couple of years working with, and with 4 of them pretty much most of my life working with, is really, really exciting and actually really proud. That's where I feel with what's going in, and I think we're going into this Ashes in a really strong position. So I can't wait for it to get going.
Enjoying working with Andrew Flintoff?
Yeah, I love him working with Fred. It's he's a great guy, great character who I've known for years. Spent quite a lot of time over the years with both him and Harmy. Probably too many wrong places at times, but you know, it's been really good.
Harmy, the Northern Superchargers have officially renamed as Sunrisers Leeds ahead of next year's edition of the 100. With the Oval Invincibles yet to be confirmed this, but they are going to be renamed MI London, and more to come, one suspects. Also, the 100 will now see 4 overseas slots in the starting 11 as opposed to 3 in previous years. Yeah, I mean, it's no surprise to me. I mean, there's a mini IPL in South Africa, and there's another one forming in England.
Yeah, there's another one forming. I can't wait to see the Yorkshire members turn out in their orange. I really can't. Can you imagine that? I've just been with Goffy, and I know he does a lot of work with Ladbrokes, and he looks a pretty picture in red. But can you imagine Darren Gough in an orange shirt? Wow, that would be. Yeah, look, it is going where it's going. It is going down the IPL. The sooner they change it to 120 balls as opposed to 100 balls, I think would be best for the competition. I like the 4 overseas players. I really do. We're talking about an auction and paying players more money. The salary cap's going up. And I'm looking at, and my cynical way of looking at that and going, we're paying the same players. And all we're doing is paying them more money. I don't think the product in the last 3 or 4 years has been very good. I really don't. I've been a knocker of the 100. I don't like the format. I love the concept. I really do like what the 100 stands for. The best players playing against the best, and the sooner we get it to 20 overs, the better. But just by giving it a little bit razzmatazz, and we're going to give it an auction, we're going to put more money in the pot, it's not going to make it any better, because all we're doing is we're giving more money to average players. This though, 4 overseas players, I think is a lot. It makes it a better tournament. It makes it a more it makes it a more attractive tournament. It makes it a better product, because naturally an overseas player is going to be better than a domestic player, because they're coming in from they're one of the best international players of the world, so taking over from a domestic players. That for me makes it a better product. So I'm all for the 4 overseas players, because English players will get better from playing with obviously a higher quality player. Where it goes.
I tell you what, Harmy, I do hope that coaches don't take the view that they have to play 4 overseas players. Bear in mind that in recent years in the IPL, some franchises have only played 2 overseas players. Because they've got that many good local players, and there'd be 1 or 2 injuries amongst the overseas players. And I just dread to think that there will be a point, and this actually happened to me once. I looked at a 100 team, and one of the overseas players I didn't know. I mean, that's how low grade he was. And I mean, it's different in the women's game, obviously, but yeah, I mean, it's great that there can be 4 overseas players. Doesn't mean to say that you have to play 4. Tom Moody has left the Oval Invincibles as head coach to become global director of cricket at the Lucknow Super Giants. Birmingham Phoenix have appointed Shane Bond as their new head coach. I wonder who Oval Invincibles will appoint. I may be off the pace here, but do you think Gareth Batty's got a look in there?
Possibly Gareth Batty, but if you look at the way the 100 owners look at the games, I don't see Gareth Batty getting a a chance of a director of cricket with Oval Invincibles, or am I Indian? Where, when you look at what happened with Andrew Flintoff at the Northern Superchargers. So they're not bothered about English. The English argument that me and Darren Gough and one or two other have said about having English coaches, that's getting further out the window with Shane Bond replacing Dan Vittori. We needed to make a standpoint, I think, at the start of the tournament where we had English coaches in it, and our pathway. We are massively in this country, Rob Key, and talking about pathway. We're going to pick players out of the pathway. There's no coaches. Where's our pathway and coaches? And unfortunately, the 100 should have been our pathway when it started in the very first year, and having English coaches in. That ship sailed now. Moody's a big loss for the Oval Invincibles, I tell you. A massive loss. He is very integral when you're being off the behind the scenes and making sure that everything's running right, and the auction and everything, that from a selection point of view of bringing their players in and overseas players. Tom's a serial winner in that front, in the IPL and franchise tournaments around the world. So that's a big loss. Who comes in? If it's going to be MI London, you're probably looking at Mahela Jayawardene, because he's worked a lot with the Mumbai Indians. Will Mark Boucher, from South Africa, he's another one who's worked hell of a lot closely with the Mumbai Indians. England haven't had too much of a connection with the Mumbai Indians, so not sure who fills that role. If they do look for somebody closer to home and somebody within the M25, then I can't see any better option than a Gareth Batty, or now Alex Stewart's coming back into a little bit more back into cricket. Will it be Alex Stewart that takes over at the Oval? So I'd imagine if they're staying local, they've got two on their doorstep in Gareth and in Alec. But if they look from their global brand, it could be something like Mahela Jayawardene, or even something like Mark Boucher.
Okay, on the subject of English coaches, it is worth mentioning that Peter Moores is going to take over at the Trent Rockets in place of Andy Flower. So that's good news. Let's have a quick word about the Test series coming up. India against South Africa. 2 tests. That's the bad news. It really, a 2-test series, particularly between 2 sort of heavyweight teams. But it's fascinating. Will India go back their spinners? That's what South Africa are expecting. So you've got Ravindra Jadeja, Kuldeep Yadav, and Washington Sundar. And for the first time ever, South Africa have got a spin attack, I think, to match India's. They've got a very, very good spin attack themselves. Keshav Maharaj is the leading spinner in South African cricket history, 212 Test wickets. Simon Harmer has got 1,000 of them in first-class cricket, 50 Test wickets. Senyaran Mutasamy recently took 11 against Pakistan in the Test. So that'll be really, really interesting. I mean, I think India edge it with the top order. Yashasvi Jaiswal's the only player in either side to average over 50. But if they do decide to go more conventional, and the venues are Eden Gardens and Guwahati, then you've got Jasprit Bumrah, Mohammad Siraj and Akash Deep against Kagiso Rabada, Marco Janssen, Corbin Bosch, Vian Mulder. I think India are favourites, obviously, aren't they? Yeah. But I do find it very, very intriguing.
Yeah, it's going to be an excellent Test match. It's world champions, probably against the best team in the world, especially in their own back garden in India. So South Africa are world Test champions, rightly so, because they played the best cricket in the pressurized situation. And you're right, you've got a bowling attack, whichever way India want to prepare the surface. Eden Gardens is probably the one that possibly might be not more seamer friendly, but bounce a little bit more. And I'm talking bounce a little bit more. It's gone from shin high to knee high. So West South Africa have got, I think, the bowling covered. And you're right. If they're going to go spin for spin, I mean, Maharaj and Harmer, that doesn't get too much better than that for overseas spin bowling unit going into India. But man, it's like anything else when you go to India. It's your ability to bowl spin versus your ability to play spin. And you might have 2 very, very good spin bowlers, they have got 3 very good spin bowlers. Have you got the ability to play that spin? And I think India's ability to play Harmer and Maharaj is going to be a lot better than what South Africa's batting unit is going to be to playing, Jadeja, Washington Sundar, and Kuldeep Yadav. And I think that's a bit like the England Australia in the Ashes. I think there's one glaring obvious matchup there that is going to be a contest that's going to decide the game. It's going to be Australia's bowlers against England's batters, and I think it's going to be India's bowlers and how South Africa's batters come up with a plan against not only them 3 spin bowlers, but like you said, if it does do a little bit with a seam, how they get over Jasprit Bumrah and Akash Deep. So I think it's South Africa's batting that needs to stand up. If it does, they win a good toss and get runs on a flat one in the first 2 days, they've definitely got 2 spin bowlers who can win the game for them over days 3, 4, and 5.
Okay, yeah. Well, that is the Achilles heel for South Africa. They've gone back. They've regressed. They've regressed 25 years ago to an era I mentioned a little bit earlier in the show. They don't have a single top order batsman averaging over 40. So that's the problem. I mean, there's a couple that haven't played very much, small sample size. Anyway, another piece of news, Harmy. Much as I understand the abandonment of the Kookaburra experiment in the county championship, I do feel that a tinge of failure about it in some ways. I mean, I thought it made sense. I mean, you can understand the logic behind introducing the Kookaburra ball, but as much as you don't want teams scoring 800 for 4, I also feel like, the English bowlers should have been able to do a bit more with the Kookaburra. I mean, yeah. I get it, but like maybe it was just overdone a bit. Maybe just have 1 round of matches with the Kookaburra.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard because you're trying to create a passage where a fast bowler comes into the game when the ball's not doing anything. Ball going quickly through the air, possibly a little bit reverse swing, which is a little bit harder in England, and also getting spin bowlers into the game when the ball's not doing anything for the seamers. I just think the Kookaburra ball, it's been abandoned because I think it was played at the wrong time. It probably was overkill as well. 4 matches out of 14 is a big number, like you said. There's an argument, could it have been playing second 11 cricket and academy cricket, but then you wouldn't have the velocity of the fast bowler and the pace of the fast bowler. But what it would do is it would learn youngsters going through the age groups that you have to be a little bit more skillful, you have to be a little bit more accurate when it comes to lines and lengths, and you have to find a way of making the ball move for you when the ball is not doing anything. So learning them from an earlier age. I think in first class cricket, the jeopardy of being in the second division, the jeopardy of losing games and the ball not doing a great deal at key times of the year when the Kookaburra ball was played with, then I just think it just didn't make sense. The idea of it, I think, is very, very good. I think the timings and the amount of cricket played with it, I just don't think it went hand in hand. But in reality, if we're going to play bookended championship matches at the start of the year and the end of the year, we're never going to play at the right time of the year for the Kookaburra ball to have any effect whatsoever, because I think it's going to have to be, it should be played in the middle of summer when you potentially can get drier surfaces and the ball reversing, because that's what the Kookaburra was about, to try and get the ball to sort of do something when it wasn't doing anything. And that was the idea of reverse swing and stuff like that. You ain't getting reverse swing at the start of the year when April and May, when it's freezing cold and it's lush green grass and the wickets are not abrasive surfaces, and it's going to just get wet and get bigger. So the idea of it was right. It'll be interesting if England lose the Ashes. We might have 6 games of it next time, but I think it's a good idea to shelve it for the time being.
All 18 counties, all 18 voted to abandon the experiment, which I was a surprise. I thought it might have been 16 too.
Because we're in a results business, man. We're in a results business now. It's instant results. That's what we're looking for. And unfortunately, the Kookaburra ball gives you a lot of draws. And
Ah.
but on one of the rounds, I don't think it was a Kookaburra ball that gave them the draws on one of the rounds. I think we lost a lot of time with rain. I think there was only one match which finished with a result. I think the other 9 were draws. But I think that was a lot to do with rain. But the problem with the Kookaburra is if you play it in a time when there is moisture around and it gets wet, I mean, it's for 60 overs, it's a complete waste of time.
Right, on to the final word, and we've got 3 to choose from, Harmy. I think we should begin with Kuwait, Harmy, the giant of Middle Eastern cricket. They beat England by 37 runs in the Hong Kong Sixes semi-final, having beaten India and Afghanistan on the way to the semi-final, by the way. I'm not quite sure what to make of the Hong Kong Sixes, but Kuwait certainly caught my eye. Pakistan won the tournament, by the way, so it's good to see them get some silverware in an otherwise empty trophy cabinet. Meet Bavsar hit 62 off 15 balls as Kuwait reached 142 for 6 in their 6 overs. George Hill went for an ignominious 35 from 1 over. And England were thumped, really, and a decent team as well. George Hill, James Coles, Dan Mosley, Ethan Brooks, Tom Aspinwall, and Toby Albert from Hampshire. Is it? I mean, I've always got the impression that it's a bit of a bachelor's weekend, really. Is it? How serious do we take the Hong Kong Sixes?
Nah, we don't take it seriously. It's nice to promote cricket in that part of the world, but the players that Stag do on that trip, it's a brilliant trip for the lads. I think loads of stories going around from years to come. To the point, I think during my era, I think there was one game where I think at the coin toss, I think they only had 4 out of 6 players in the stadium. Never mind I think 4 out of 6 players in Hong Kong. Never mind in the stadium. So, I mean, it is what it is. I mean, I'm so pleased for somebody like Kuwait, who probably would have took it a hell of a lot more seriously than what England would have. But if the Kuwaitis are coming in, Saudis are coming in, wow. I mean, cricket's going to come in with some cash. But nah, it's Ethan Brooks as well. I mean, what an eventful 2 overs that was. 3 for 29 off 12 balls. that's an eventful 2 overs. But look, it is what it's good in a way that you get. George Hill's a very, very good cricketer. So's Mosley. I like Coles. I think Coles is a good cricketer from Sussex, same as Ethan Brooks. I look at that group there and go, do you know what? George Hill, James Coles, possibly has a little bit more of a chance. Ethan Brooks, Tom Aspinwall, and Dan Mosley especially. They're probably cricketers who won't play international cricket because they're probably not. They're just not good enough. So they're going to be very, very good and probably dominate first-class cricket and do really well on the county scene, but probably not good enough at one sort of skill set, bat or ball, to get them nailed on place in the team for England, and then kick on with an international career. They are probably all good enough to play for England, but I think that's what will ultimately get them short. Coles is the only one I think might have an outside sniff and an outside chance. We've seen Mosley, and we don't know whether is he a batting all rounder, is he a bowling all rounder. Brooks is the same. George Hill's had a great season for Yorkshire, but again, does he bat? Is he good enough to get in England's top 6? Probably not. Is he good enough to get England's frontline 3 seamers? Probably not. But he's a very, very, very good cricketer.
Right, on to Akash Kumar Chowdhury. I'm sure that you saw this story. He had 8 consecutive 6s to score the fastest ever first-class 50 for Meghalaya against Arunachal Pradesh in the Ranji Trophy Plate Group match. It's going to happen. I mean, I've asked you a couple of times over the last 5 years. Do you think that we'll ever have a 9-ball 50? It'll happen, won't it?
Very close there. 11 balls. Wow. I mean, where were they playing? Were they playing inside the Hong Kong Stadium? Because that's tiny as well. I mean, good on him. I mean, 11 balls, 8 sixes. I think you're right. I think we could get to a point where somebody somebody hits 6 sixes in 1 over, goes down the other end and hits the next 3 balls for 6, and that will be the perfect 50. I think you're right. I think it's getting closer and it's coming.
And finally, this raised my eyebrows. It doesn't take much to raise my eyebrows, but I read that the Big Bash had taken a leaf out of baseball's book, Harmy, in announcing that in the Big Bash, if a ball is hit into the crowd, not necessarily a 6, even if it hits the boundary rope and bounces into the crowd, whoever gets their hands on it can keep it. Of course, we know that's the case in baseball. Every home run, the ball is kept by whoever manages to get their paws on it. I thought that sounds interesting. Then it was a attention-grabbing headline. I thought, is this really going to work in cricket? And then I realised that the Big Bash are obsessed with innovations, aren't they? They have that. Do they still have the surge,
Yeah.
What do they call it? The surge.
It is the surge. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, they come up with a new innovation every year, and I thought, how's this going to work in cricket? Because I know you can't do much to a ball in 20 overs. Anyway, I read on, and it was a hook for a new sponsor, and it only applies in the first over. There aren't too many 6s hit in the first over, but one of the reasons I wanted to use this as a final word is to ask you a question I should know the answer to, but I don't. How much can you actually do to a ball in a 20 over match? How much does it matter looking after it in a T20?
Well, you can do some you can do some damage to it, and if you're playing with it and it keeps getting belted into the stand, it's going to be a lot softer by the end, by 8, 17, 18, 19 overs. So if you manage to get a ball soft, and you work it hard and you do well to get it soft, and it's not easy to hit it out the ground, then all of a sudden you hit one out the ground, that ball doesn't come back, and a hard ball is replacing it, then that could go out the ground quite quickly. So you can have a difference in conditions of the ball depending on how the game situation is played. I must admit, I did see this headline and I thought, yeah, good, sounds good, this one. Are you going to let that guy bowl a second over? I mean, the gimmicks that they're going with. If you catch it, now you can come on and bowl a second over. I mean, come on. I mean, the game doesn't need that. I mean, it really doesn't. I know I'm all for having sponsors, but keep the game for what it is. There's a credibility to the game. If all of a sudden you're trying to make gimmick after gimmick, we're trying to condense a game of cricket into an hour and 25 minutes. If you're hitting, if a ball goes, just for instance, you bowl 2 rank long hobs in the first over, and the ball goes out of park twice, we're having a go at batters changing gloves in the middle of overs, and saying hurry up and continue with the game. If you've got the umpire running, you could have the umpire running on the field 3 times in the first over to change a ball. That game's now going to last 2.5 hours. I'm sorry. I mean, I'm all for trying to bring in sponsors, but changing balls at the end of in the first over. I mean, like I said before, what you're going to do? You're going to say to the guy, well, if you catch it, we will, or you can actually ask the opposition which bowler you want to bowl the second over. I mean, it's farcical. Madness. I know they're trying to bring money in, but I think this is one bridge too far.
You've been listening to Following On with me, Neil Manthorp, alongside former England fast bowler Steve Harmison. We'll be back at a similar time next week to build up to the start of the first Ashes Test again between Australia and England in Perth. But for now, this has been another edition of Following On.